Okie dokie. So now we're going to talk about the thesis statement. There are some other videos that I know that you have watched and others that you might watch again. And the thesis statement gets talked about a lot. Sometimes when we talk about paragraphs, we talk about topic sentences, and then we use the thesis statement when we're talking about an essay. But really, they're the same thing. I don't usually find much of a difference between a thesis statement and a topic sentence or a controlling idea. So what is a thesis statement? Basically, it's the main point, the main idea, it's the main assertion, it's the main claim that somebody is trying to make in either a paragraph or an essay. That's what it is, and that's what its purpose is. It's the thing that guides the entire piece of writing. Usually it's a single sentence. Sometimes it has to be two sentences, sometimes it's a more complex sentence, but generally speaking, you really want to try to get it down into one single sentence. Now, the other thing that's important about the thesis statement is that every other sentence in the essay, every other sentence in the paragraph, every other piece of text that you are writing is in support of that thesis statement. So if you're making an argument, if you're writing a paper about, I don't know, character development in a novel that you're reading, or if you're comparing and contrasting two different characters or two different ideas, no matter what your assignment is, once you have crafted that thesis statement, every other sentence in the piece of writing supports that statement. So people often spend a lot of time figuring out how to write a good thesis statement. And it's not easy to write a good thesis statement. It takes a lot of reading, I think, to be able to figure out what makes a thesis statement work. As you're reading and you find that you're attracted to a particular style of writing, or you're finding that a particular style of writing is easy for you to follow as a reader, you might begin to look at how that writer has created that thesis statement and begin to try to adapt it to your writing so that you can begin to develop more and more of your own voice. But in the first place, you're going to be looking at different thesis statements from different writers. Well, a couple of basic characteristics of a thesis are these. The first thing is that a thesis is debatable. Someone can often argue the opposite point of view, or they can come up with some kind of an argument. It's not just a statement of fact. Even for some kind of topics or prompts that seem to be kind of simple about, like, even if you were asked a question about to describe, the person that you would, want to be partnered with, or what are the qualities that you seek in an intimate partner, and why, that why becomes an important piece. If you choose, 2 or 3 or 4 characteristics of a particular person, I might read that essay and say, that's crazy. What do you care if the person is, beautiful, for example, or isn't it important for you that the person has a sense of humor, or whatever? When I read that thesis statement, I can already begin to argue, and that means that the thesis statement is debatable, it's arguable. That's important. Another characteristic of the thesis statement is that it's specific, so that I know exactly what I'm going to be reading as a reader. The thesis statement is creating the parameters for the rest of the essay, and so you want to be able to define specifically what those parameters are going to be. What are the topics going to be that we're going to read about? The other thing is, you don't want to have a really long kind of items in a series types list, like, I like apples, oranges, bananas, pears, apricots, nectarines, peaches. It just goes on and on and on and on. You have a long list, and that becomes a problem. And sometimes the reason that it's a problem is because when you're writing an essay, if you have a whole bunch of these items or a whole bunch of reasons for something, you don't often have enough time to really develop them very fully. And so even though there are maybe a lot of reasons for something, the explanation is so shallow that it doesn't make much of an impression on a reader. So it's better if you can try to keep your list down to 2, 3, 4 items or sections of, depending on the kind of paper that you're writing. Another thing that you might think about trying to do something that's more debatable and specific is to use the although actually. If you use that kind of a construction, and you don't necessarily need to write it for your official thesis, but it's one thing that you can do to help you think about writing a thesis. So for example, I wrote a couple of them here. The first one is, although a lack of funding is often cited as the reason that standardized test scores for low-income schools often lag behind those of wealthier schools, actually significant changes can be made for very little money. So in that one, it's pretty specific. It's debatable too. People can say, no, those changes aren't going to be significant. It's not true. You have to have a lot of money to make changes in public school system. And so this one is arguable, and it's specific. We're talking about significant changes, we're talking about the amount of money, and we're talking about low-income schools versus wealthier schools. The second one here says, although carving time out to have a nap during the day can be difficult, actually the benefits to health and productivity are clear. Now, a lot of people would completely argue with that and say that that's the dumbest thing that they've ever heard about. Only children need to have naps. And so that becomes a thesis statement for an argument also. Now, the reason I have actually highlighted in red here, or written in red, is because it's a little bit awkward to leave that actually there. It feels strange even for me to read it, but it helps me to have that actually in there to write the sentence. And so what I would do instead of keeping the actually there is I would delete it and just get rid of it altogether. I'm just using it as a way to help me write a better thesis statement. So what you might do now is go ahead and take a look at some of the work that you have done and figure out, look at your thesis statements and see if your thesis statements fit this kind of format. Are they debatable? Are they specific? And can you argue them and make it so that everything else that you say in the paragraph is making your argument, is supporting your argument, is explaining why your opinion or your plan should be the one to be followed. Okay?